My parents didn't show up for my daughter's funeral. But a week later, they demanded her $950,000 trust fund. Not for me, but for my younger sister's wedding. Listen closely, because this story is going to break your heart and shake you to the core. I'm Amara Johnson, in my late 20s, a single mom, and a woman still learning how to survive when the people who are supposed to love you most let you down. My little girl, Zariah, was only 6 when she passed. One moment she was laughing, asking me to read her favorite story again, and the next she was gone. A sudden illness took her in a way that made no sense, and left my world in pieces. I couldn't breathe, couldn't eat, couldn't imagine a life without her tiny hand in mine. The funeral was a blur of sadness and whispers. Friends and distant relatives showed up, some bringing flowers, others just offering hugs. But the people who were supposed to be there no matter what, my own parents, Elaine and Richard Johnson, didn't even make a call. They didn't come. They didn't send a note. Nothing. I stood there in the cemetery, feeling the weight of my grief double because of their absence. My heart screamed that if they couldn't even show up for their granddaughter's last goodbye, maybe they never really cared. I've known for years that my parents favored my younger sister, Maribel. She got everything. The new clothes, the trips, the constant attention. I was always expected to work hard, keep quiet, and never complain. When I dared to stand up for myself, I was labeled selfish or difficult. I had learned to swallow my hurt, but losing Zariah made all that pain explode. It was like a fresh wound that never had a chance to heal. As I walked away from the grave, holding the small box with Zariah's ashes, I felt utterly alone. The emptiness wasn't just because of losing her. It was because the people I trusted to support me in my darkest hour didn't even acknowledge my pain. They had loved my sister more, and now it felt like they had completely erased me and Zariah from their world. Every step away from that cemetery was heavy, each one a reminder of the betrayal I couldn't escape. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Within a week, instead of offering comfort, my parents called. They didn't talk about Zariah, didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "We're here for you." They talked about my sister's wedding and how Zariah's trust fund should help pay for it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My little girl, just gone, and the first thing on their minds was throwing a lavish party for the sister they had always spoiled. At that moment, I realized my grief wasn't just about loss. It was about betrayal, and it was personal. The people I trusted most had shown me who they really were, and I had to find a way to survive for Zariah and for myself. Growing up, my parents were always strict, but not in a way that felt fair. Elaine and Richard Johnson expected me to follow rules without question, never complain, and put the family before myself. But no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed to be enough. My younger sister, Maribel, on the other hand, was treated like a little princess. She was spoiled, sheltered, and could do no wrong in their eyes. Every birthday, every achievement, every little thing she wanted was met with praise or money, while I had to fight for even a simple good job. I learned early on that showing emotion wasn't allowed unless it fit into their idea of proper behavior. I remember crying over small disappointments, only to be told I was too sensitive or selfish for caring so much. The favoritism was clear. If Maribel wanted a new dress or a trip, my parents would stretch their budget without hesitation. When I tried to ask for help or support, I was reminded that I needed to be independent, that I had to manage on my own. It left me feeling like I was always on the outside, trying to earn affection that was freely given to my sister. Money was always a source of tension in our family. Every time I made a choice that didn't include them or didn't follow their rules, they called me selfish. I remember arguing with them as a teenager about wanting to go to college out of state, about wanting to work hard for my own dreams instead of relying on their handouts. Maribel never had to fight for anything. I was constantly compared to her, told I was ungrateful, when I simply wanted fairness. Those old wounds never really healed. They just sat under the surface, ready to sting whenever I was vulnerable. After Zariah passed, all of that came rushing back. I had been hoping, maybe foolishly, that my parents would finally show their love when it mattered most. But they didn't. Not at the funeral, not with a call, not even a simple message. I couldn't understand it. How could the people who had shaped so much of my life, who had raised me through those years of judgment and neglect, completely ignore me and my daughter in the darkest moment of our lives? The grief was raw enough, but their absence felt like a punch to the gut. It confirmed everything I had felt as a child. I was never enough for them, and my sister was always the golden child. Sitting alone in the quiet after the funeral, I kept replaying every argument, every moment I had been told I was selfish, every achievement that had gone unnoticed. I realized then that my grief wasn't just about losing Zariah. It was also about finally seeing the truth of my family. They had always chosen Maribel over me, and they weren't going to change. The rejection cut deeper than the illness, the loss, or the funeral itself. It left me questioning not only their love, but whether I could ever depend on anyone in that family again. For the first time, I understood the patterns of my life, the repeated betrayals, and the favoritism that shaped me. And as painful as it was, it also sparked something inside me. A resolve that, no matter what, I wouldn't let their neglect define me or my daughter's memory. When I think back to Zariah's father, Devon, my heart aches in a different way. He had been gone for years, taken too soon in a car accident that left me raising our daughter on my own. Devon wasn't Perfect, but he loved Zariah deeply. Before his passing, he had been careful with his money, working extra hours and saving every dollar he could. He wanted to make sure that even if something ever happened to him, Zariah would have a future that was secure. That's why he set up the trust fund, $950,000, locked away with her name on it. It was his way of still protecting her, even from the grave. For years, I never touched it. It wasn't mine. It was hers, meant for her schooling, her dreams, maybe even her first home someday. I used to imagine sitting beside her at 18, showing her the papers and telling her, "Your daddy made sure you'd always be okay." That thought alone gave me strength when times were hard, when the bills piled up, or when I worked double shifts just to keep us afloat. I refused to lean on the fund because it wasn't about me. It was the last promise Devon had made to her. But after Zariah's death, everything changed. The lawyers told me the money now came to me as her guardian. By law, it was mine to claim. I sat in that office, papers spread out in front of me, and felt like I was suffocating. $950,000, and it felt heavier than any debt, any bill, any responsibility I had ever carried. This wasn't a windfall. It was a reminder that my little girl was gone. The check, the numbers on the page, they weren't a blessing, they were a grave marker written in ink. I couldn't see it as money for myself. I couldn't imagine spending a single dollar on clothes, rent, or anything ordinary. To me, it was sacred. The last gift Devon and Zariah had left me. A piece of them both, tied together in a way no one else could touch. Holding those documents felt like holding Zariah's memory in my hands, fragile and priceless. That's when I knew what I wanted to do. If I couldn't watch her grow up, I could at least make sure her name lived on. I began thinking about a scholarship, something for children like her, bright, curious, and full of life. Or maybe a small foundation for kids with illnesses, so no one else had to feel the sudden shock of losing a child the way I did. I didn't have the details yet, but I had the determination. The money was never going to buy back what I lost, but it could create something lasting, something meaningful. It could be the way Zariah's name carried on, not as a tragedy, but as a light for others. In that moment, I promised myself that whatever I did with the trust fund, it would honor her. And no one, absolutely no one, was going to take that away from me. It was about a week after the funeral when my phone finally rang. I stared at the screen, seeing my parents' names light up, and for a split second I thought maybe, just maybe, they were finally going to say something comforting. Maybe they had realized how cruel their silence had been. My chest tightened as I picked up the call, waiting for the words I needed to hear. "We're sorry, Amara. We should have been there. How are you holding up?" But none of that came. Instead, my mother's voice was sharp, businesslike. "Amara, we need to talk about Maribel's wedding," she said. I sat frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, wondering if I had misheard her. My daughter had just been laid to rest. My grief was still raw, my home still filled with her things, her toys untouched in the corner. And here was my mother, skipping over condolences like they didn't matter, and diving straight into party plans. Before I could respond, my father chimed in. His tone was heavy, like he was trying to sound reasonable. "You know, Zariah doesn't need that money anymore. It would be a waste to just let it sit there. Maribel could really use it to make her wedding everything it should be." I remember my hand shaking as I held the phone. The words didn't sound real. My parents, the people who hadn't shown their faces at their granddaughter's funeral, were now telling me her trust fund should be spent on centerpieces, flowers, and a ballroom dance floor. My throat went dry. For a moment, I couldn't even find my voice. When I finally managed to speak, it came out more like a whisper. "You're asking me to give my daughter's trust fund, To Maribel's wedding? My mother didn't hesitate. It's not about giving it away, Amara. It's about honoring family. Don't you think Zariah would want the money to bring happiness to the people she loved? That was it, the sentence that cracked something inside me. My parents, who had ignored Zariah in life and abandoned her in death, were now trying to use her name to guilt me into funding Maribel's dream day. It felt like they were spitting on her memory, reducing my daughter's life to a checkbook. I could hear Maribel laughing faintly in the background, her voice smug and excited, like she was already picturing herself walking down the aisle paid for by money meant for my child's future. The betrayal hit me harder than I expected. My chest burned and tears stung my eyes, but it wasn't grief this time. It was rage. To them, Zariah wasn't a person anymore. She was just a fund, a number on paper, a means to make Maribel's life easier. And in that moment, I realized something devastating. My parents hadn't just failed me at the funeral. They had erased my daughter, as if her short, beautiful life meant nothing at all. The dinner was supposed to be a chance to talk things out. At least that's how my mother put it when she invited me. Against my better judgment, I went. A part of me still hoped there might be some scrap of decency left in them, some flicker of compassion for what I had gone through. Instead, the moment I walked into the restaurant and saw Maribel sitting there in her designer dress, smiling like she owned the world, I knew exactly what this dinner was really about. We sat down, and the air was thick with tension. For a few minutes, no one said much, just clinking silverware and forced smiles from my parents. Then Maribel leaned forward, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Amara, you know Zariah would have wanted family happiness. She wouldn't want all that money sitting in an account when it could make my wedding beautiful. I froze, staring at her across the table. The audacity in her tone made my stomach turn. She spoke about my daughter like she was some abstract idea, not a little girl who had laughed, played, and held my hand every night before bed. Before I could reply, my father jumped in. Your sister's right. This isn't about greed. It's about honoring Zariah in a way that brings joy to everyone. What better way to keep her spirit alive than through family celebration? My mother nodded eagerly, piling on. Exactly. Keeping the money just for yourself is selfish. You're holding on to grief instead of moving forward. If you really loved Zariah, you'd want to use that money to create happiness, not let it rot away. Their words were like knives, each one twisting deeper. I had barely spoken a word, but somehow I was already painted as the villain, the selfish one, the ungrateful daughter who didn't know how to honor her child. My hands shook under the table. I turned to Maribel, who was smirking now, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. She wanted this. She wanted me cornered, guilt, pushed into submission the way I always had been when we were growing up. Don't you dare, I finally said, my voice breaking but firm. Don't you dare use my daughter's name to justify your greed. Zariah was my child. Not yours. Not yours to erase, not yours to spend. Maribel rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. You're being dramatic, Amara. It's just money. You can't bring her back. That was it. The last straw. I pushed my chair back so hard it scraped the floor. The restaurant went silent for a moment as I stood up, tears burning in my eyes. I will never forgive you for this, I said, my voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. Without another glance at their faces, those smug, heartless faces, I walked out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for leaving them behind. After that dinner, I stopped answering their calls. I blocked their numbers, muted their messages, and shut every door they thought they still had open to me. For the first time in my life, I cut contact completely. It wasn't easy. As twisted as my relationship with them had been, they were still my parents, still the voices I had grown up hearing, the people I had always been told to obey. Walking away felt like ripping off a part of myself, but I knew if I didn't, they would keep breaking me piece by piece. The silence that followed was heavy. My apartment felt colder, quieter than ever. I would wake up at night expecting to hear Zariah's footsteps running down the hall, or her little voice calling for me. Instead, there was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. Grief wrapped itself around me like a blanket I couldn't shake off. Some mornings, I didn't even want to get out of bed. In that stillness, my mind replayed every moment of my past. All the times I had been called selfish for saying no. All the times I had been made to feel guilty just for wanting something for myself. I remembered birthdays where Maribel was showered with gifts while I got a polite, happy birthday, and nothing else. I remembered the arguments about money, about choices, about independence. It had always been the same story, me being punished for standing up for myself, and Maribel being rewarded for taking. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. My parents hadn't just hurt me now. They had been conditioning me my entire life, making me believe that putting myself first was wrong, that my needs didn't matter. And now they were trying to use Zariah's memory to do the same thing, to guilt me into handing over what was sacred, what was hers. That realization sparked something inside me, a slow, steady burn that grew stronger with each passing day. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them take Zariah's last gift and twist it into something shallow and greedy. My daughter's life had meant too much, her light had shone too brightly, to let her memory be turned into a wedding budget. So I started to plan, not with anger or violence, but with dignity. I wrote down ideas in a small notebook, late at night when I couldn't sleep. Ways to honor Zariah. Ways to make her name live on in something beautiful. Each page was a piece of healing, a quiet act of rebellion against the family that had tried to silence me. In the middle of my grief, I found a kind of strength I didn't know I had. I couldn't bring my daughter back, but I could protect her memory. And in doing so, I could finally protect myself too. The first step I took was going back to the lawyer. I needed to make sure every corner of that trust was sealed tight, every loophole closed, every possibility of my parents or Maribel slipping their hands into it eliminated. Sitting in that office again, I told the lawyer plainly, I don't want anyone else touching this money, ever. Not my parents, not my sister, no one. He looked at me with a kind of knowing sympathy and assured me the documents could be reinforced, leaving no room for challenge. I signed every paper with trembling hands, but steady resolve. This was mine now, not for luxury, not for comfort, but for Zariah. Once the legal side was secure, I turned to what had been brewing in my heart since the day I held those trust papers. I set up a foundation in Zariah's name. It wasn't about me, it was about her. I wanted children who were facing illnesses like the one that had stolen her from me to have hope, opportunities, and support. The scholarship fund began small, but the mission was clear. To help kids whose families were drowning in medical bills, to give them a chance at an education, a future Zariah would never have. The first time I saw a child's name on the scholarship approval list, tears blurred my eyes. It felt like Zariah's spirit was still here, reaching out and touching lives even though she was gone. And the more I shared her story, the more the community responded. Neighbors, schools, even local churches began talking about the foundation. Donations trickled in, then grew. People praised the effort, saying it was one of the most meaningful ways they had seen someone turn grief into something good. Word spread quickly, and with it came pride. Not pride in myself, but pride in knowing my daughter's name was not fading away. She wasn't just a memory locked in a graveyard. She was alive in the lives she touched. Every smile from a grateful parent, every thank you letter, reminded me why I was doing this. But of course, not everyone was happy. My parents found out, and their reaction was exactly what I should have expected. They called me, voices sharp and bitter, accusing me of being vindictive. So you'd rather throw money at strangers than take care of your own family? My father sneered. My mother added, You think this makes you noble, but all you're doing is punishing us. You're spiting your sister for no reason. Their words rolled over me, but this time they didn't pierce. I had heard selfish my whole life. Now they were just proving what I already knew. That to them, family only meant Maribel. I didn't answer their accusations. I didn't need to. The foundation spoke louder than anything I could have said. For the first time, I felt untouchable. Their anger only confirmed one thing. My revenge was working, and it was rooted not in destruction, but in dignity. Maribel's big day finally arrived, but it was nothing like the grand event she had been bragging about for months. Without the trust fund money she had counted on, everything was scaled back. The venue wasn't the luxurious ballroom she had once described. It was a modest banquet hall on the edge of town. The flowers were fewer, the decorations simple, and the menu far plainer than she had dreamed. Even her dress, though pretty, didn't have the sparkle and detail she had boasted it would. From the moment I walked in, I could hear the whispers. Guests exchanged looks, murmuring about how different the wedding was from what Maribel had promised. I thought she said it was going to be at the Lakeside Hotel, one woman muttered to another. This feels small, another said quietly. I caught those words, and though I stayed silent, a part of me couldn't help but notice the irony. Maribel had always lived for appearances, and now, Without me financing her dreams, her image was crumbling right in front of her. As the ceremony ended and the reception began, the tension became harder to ignore. Maribel's smile looked forced, and every little thing seemed to irritate her. The cake wasn't as tall as she had wanted, the music wasn't exactly right, and the crowd wasn't impressed. She kept glancing at me across the room, her eyes sharp with resentment, as though my very presence was a reminder of what she didn't have. It all came to a head during the toasts. A few friends spoke kindly, but when someone mentioned how sweet, it was that I had come despite everything, Maribel snapped. She slammed her glass down and stood up, her face red with anger. "Do you all want to know why this wedding isn't what I planned?" she shouted. The room went quiet instantly, all eyes turning toward her. "It's because my so-called sister stole it from me. She stole my wedding. She took money that should have gone to family and wasted it on strangers." The silence was thick, broken only by gasps and the sound of someone dropping a fork. People turned in their seats, whispering behind their hands. Some looked at me with sympathy. Others stared at Maribel with shock. Her groom shifted uncomfortably, trying to calm her down, but she shoved his hand away. "Don't defend her," she barked. "She doesn't care about family. She only cares about making herself look good." Watching her unravel like that in front of her guests, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Her own entitlement was doing the work for me. The crowd could see it, hear it, and judge it without my help. The wedding she had wanted to be the pinnacle of her life had turned into a public display of her bitterness. And as the whispers grew louder around the room, it was clear to everyone that Maribel's downfall wasn't because of me. It was because of her own greed. It didn't take long after the wedding disaster for the final blow to come. My parents called me one evening, their voices cold and final. There was no small talk, no attempt at pretending. My father said flatly, "You are no longer part of this family." My mother echoed him, adding that I had chosen strangers over blood, and that they would not forgive me for embarrassing Maribel. It was the official disowning, something I had felt coming for months, but still cut deep when the words were spoken. For a moment after the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at the phone in my hand. A part of me wanted to cry, to grieve the loss of parents who should have loved me unconditionally. But another part of me felt strangely lighter. The control they had tried to keep over me all my life, the guilt, the manipulation, the constant pressure, was gone. Their rejection, while painful, was also freedom. I had broken the chains they had wrapped around me since childhood. Meanwhile, Maribel's marriage, which had started with so much show and so little substance, began to crumble almost immediately. Without the financial cushion she had expected, the reality of adult responsibilities set in fast. Bills piled up, arguments erupted, and her husband grew tired of her endless demands. People whispered that he had stopped coming home some nights, while she was seen complaining loudly about how unfair life was. The cracks in her perfect image spread quickly, and soon it was no secret that her marriage was falling apart. I didn't take joy in her misery, but I couldn't ignore the irony. The same entitlement that had driven her to scream at me in public was now eating away at her own life. She had built her world on appearances and greed, and without someone else to fund it, it collapsed. My parents had disowned me for refusing to support her, and yet all their sacrifices for her happiness still couldn't save her marriage. While they dealt with their unraveling world, I poured myself deeper into Zariah's foundation. Each scholarship we awarded, each child we supported, reminded me why I had chosen this path. I visited hospitals, spoke with families, and heard stories of kids fighting illnesses with the same bravery my daughter had shown. Their parents hugged me, sometimes with tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving them a little relief. Every word of gratitude healed a piece of my broken heart. Though I had lost my parents and sister, I had gained something they would never understand: purpose. I was no longer weighed down by their approval or disapproval. I was free to honor Zariah in the way she deserved, turning my grief into something that mattered. The fallout with my family was final, but so was my resolve. I had chosen love, legacy, and dignity over greed, and that choice was the one that finally gave me peace. The years passed, and time softened some of the sharpest edges of my grief, though the ache of losing Zariah never truly left me. On a quiet afternoon, I walked through the familiar path of the cemetery, holding a small bouquet of lilies, her favorite flowers. The air was cool, the sky calm, and for once, I felt a strange kind of peace settling over me. I knelt down at her grave, brushing away a few fallen leaves from the stone. "Hi, baby," I whispered, placing the flowers neatly at the base. It's been a while, but I have so much to tell you. My voice trembled, but this time it wasn't only from sadness, it was from pride. I told her about the foundation that carried her name, how it had grown far beyond what I once dreamed. Hundreds of children had received scholarships, medical support, and resources that gave them hope when life tried to take it away. You've changed lives, Zariah, I said softly, my eyes blurring. Your light didn't go out. It just spread. As I sat there, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. My parents, my sister, the way they turned their backs on me, the cruelty of their greed. They had destroyed any chance of family left between us, all for money that was never theirs to claim. For years, I wondered if I had lost too much by holding my ground. But now, sitting by my daughter's grave, I knew the truth. I hadn't lost, I had chosen differently. Their lives had gone on, but not without cracks. I'd heard whispers about my sister's marriage failing completely, about my parents' loneliness after pushing everyone away except the daughter who could no longer prop up their pride. But I didn't need to see it or gloat over it. Their downfall wasn't my goal, and it was never my victory to claim. My revenge was something quieter, something they could never take from me. It was in every child who walked across a stage holding a diploma funded by Zariah's foundation. It was in every family that didn't have to choose between rent and medicine because we stepped in to help. And it was in the way I had learned to stand tall, no longer bending under guilt or manipulation. I placed my hand gently against the stone, smiling through my tears. You gave me strength, sweet girl. And I hope wherever you are, you're proud of me. Proud of us. As I stood up to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. My parents and sister had tried to erase Zariah's memory into something convenient for them. But I had kept her alive in the most meaningful way possible. My revenge wasn't loud, wasn't cruel. It was simply living well, carrying her legacy, and refusing to let greed define our story. And in that quiet triumph, I finally felt whole. Do you believe Amara was right to cut ties and choose peace over family drama? Or should she have given them another chance? Share your thoughts down below. I really want to hear your take. And if heartfelt stories like this speak to you, make sure to hit subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one.